Okay, so we're going to start talking about the business stuff end of this. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, there's not a handout for this. It's liability insurance. So I'm sure that there might be questions to the two of you that are sitting here. But as part of the studio contract, I require that you get your own liability coverage. So the studio is covered for liability, but liability insurance is super, super cheap for teachers to have for themselves. It's like $75 a year. Susan, you might have it from dance, do you? They don't require that you have it and you're working with kids. Okay, that's kind of crazy. That there's something called
Get your liability insurance.
yeah. So there's a couple different places I recommend. One would be HPSO. Yeah, that's one option. You can get it through them. I use Sadler Insurance to insure the studio. So the studio is covered. I have 3 different policies on the studio, and I'm covered under one of them as the owner from my teaching. So I have insurance on the equipment. So like if the equipment were to like injure the client, there's insurance on that. Then we also have standard business insurance, which is like flood, fire, theft on all the equipment. And then we also have like your standard like slip and fall accident insurance, inside and outside. And then the teaching is obviously also covered under that. But it's just a good idea to get your own policy too. I've, knock on wood, never been, or I guess I should say knock on fake wood, I've never been sued in like all the years of teaching, and there's not really a lot of accidents in here.
I haven't done it with this.
And it's highly unlikely that you would cause an at-fault accident. It's just not likely that like crazy stuff happens. But it's usually like $75 to $100 a year, and you can get a student discount for the first year. So when you like go looking for rates, it might be even less for it. Do you have any other liability insurance questions?
You said Sadler, like
Sadler, Sadler. I think it's sadlerfitness.com. But it doesn't matter. I know Carrie went shopping for rates, and it's $150 to need to add a teacher onto mine, and that was less expensive than what she was finding. But HTSO, I believe, is less than that. That she just had me add her to ours. All right, so the first handout we're going to look at is the bio handout that was written by somebody else that I just totally stole, borrowed. So it's somewhere in there. It says simple guidelines to make sure your bio doesn't suck.
Love it.
So basically, it's fun to have bios of all the teachers on our website because it just kind of differentiates each of us from one another, and might cause, a new client who's looking to sort of have a personal connection with you just because of some history, or your background, or what you did, or how you got to Pilates, all things like that. So, when you're thinking about writing your bio, I think these are kind of questions down here that are a good thing to answer as you're thinking about that, which kind of is what differentiates each of us from one another. Like I sort of came to Pilates through an injury. Other people come because they're just looking for some exercise. Whatever. And then, what made you want to become a teacher? If there's, a specific client that and this isn't going to really apply to you guys yet, but if there's like specific extra trainings you've done, or other things you do, like for you, your dance kind of background, Susan, that kind of stuff would be fun to mention in there, just to show yourself that you're a little bit different. Yeah. And then when, since I know the two of you that are sitting in front of me both want to teach at the studios, like for us, whereas not everyone who's going through the training wants to teach for knee. We'll do a blog post on our website about you, and there's a separate set of questions that I had you answer that are more like fun and personal, and then I'll send that out in a newsletter with a photo of you. We have like professional staff photos on the front wall, so somewhere through the process we'll do that. Plus I think some of the teachers want their pictures retaken. I just had mine retaken because I was 6 months pregnant in the one that was up there, even though it was only from here. Then I felt like I had chubby cheeks, so I had to have that fixed. The veinness in the and if you read the bios that are on our website, they were all sort of done with this thought in mind. So like Donna's and mine are very different. Carrie just recently rewrote hers. She had like some sort of Zen moment and decided that that hers needed to be rewritten. So they've all been updated.
When do you want us to do the bio?
Whenever you, so that's part of your homework from this. So whenever you do it, and then depending on where you guys are, like, and the people that are listening, like where they are with me, we might use it for a newsletter to do some sort of teacher, and then I'll have you do those blog posts. And actually, I'll probably send the blog post questions to everyone. I'm gonna write that down as homework for myself. I can't write on scrap paper. All right. So I'll send those in an email to you.
Do you want to see the bio first, or can we do it right on the website?
You'll just email it to me and I'll put it up for you. Okay. So we're gonna move on to talking about the Pilates Method Alliance. Which is there's a handout now that says the Pilates, the PMA Code of Ethics. So we're gonna go to that. So the Pilates Method Alliance was founded probably at this point like 15 years ago, and it was an organization that sort of stepped up in the community to create an over governing board of the Pilates industry. It hasn't quite come into that role yet, but like where like the American Medical Association kind of thing, like they're sort of hoping eventually to have that kind of presence in this field, or the like dental association, that kind of thing, trying to make Pilates teachers standardized. Yeah, it's not necessarily like your training is standardized, but like that everyone's gone through a basic hurdle to get to being a teacher. Right now, there's nothing requiring anyone to go take the PMA exam. Of the staff here, I'm the only person that's done it. You'll never meet like a gym employed NAT instructor that has taken the PMA. You have to be like equipment trained. They have specific things that you have to have done to take their test. And when you're done with this training, you'll have all of those things done. So the program that you're doing, I went through the process of setting it up as a fostering Pilates professionals program, so everyone's automatically able to just take the test. Like there's paperwork you have to do, and I just had to sign off on it, saying that you finished this training. And that's basically all the checking they do into your background. Since I set it up through them, they assume that when you're done with that, you're ready to go. So they've sort of set up some like standards. So the code of ethics is really kind of simple, that like, you know, no one should harm their clients. The big thing that they're talking about though is teaching within your scope of practice, which is the next handout. So we'll talk about that more when we flip this over. You know, professional boundaries, don't exploit or harass your clients, some client confidentiality. You know, we have a big open space here, so that's not like, and you'll see that in physical therapist's office, it's not like you're going to go talk to your neighbors about the broken client that you had, but at the same time, you know, people are going to see each other here. It's not like you're in a locked up room, like when you did you do like counseling as a social worker, like when you were like in the room with the door shut with the client? It's not that kind of confidentiality, but it's different, but still don't, if you see that a client has some sort of outside medical issue, you're going to want them to get real medical attention. I'll sometimes suggest, oh, that's like that's a this kind of doctor issue. But people are going to think you know everything. They're going to ask, like, what do you think's wrong with my eye? Which you're going to have, you're like, I'm a Pilates teacher, not an eye doctor, so that you can't really solve those issues for them, but they'll think you can. We try not to discriminate against clients. We don't try not to steal each other's clients. We, maintain a professional appearance. I am always very clear when I suggest, like, that's a physical therapist issue or whatever, that, like, I'm not a doctor and I could be wrong, but to me that seems like a so-and-so kind of issue. The same thing when I'll say, like, oh, maybe you should stick some ice on that, but, like, I'm not a real doctor, that sounds like inflammation, maybe you should stick some ice on that, but if that persists, you need to see a real doctor. And then the biggest thing is the Pilates Method Alliance wants people to continue to gain educational experience. So as part of this training, there's no requirement to do continuing education, but if you were ever to sit for the Pilates Method Alliance, they do have a continuing education requirement for every 2 years. I think it's 16 hours. Which you can do, like, usually in one course in a weekend. Usually that is how that works out. And then they have some rules about teaching clients, about numbers of clients per instructor, and I really feel that this is important, and we do adhere to this in the studio. That, like, 10 students is really enough for a teacher. Like, that's a lot. Like, you have 2 eyeballs. And if you're lucky, they can look in slightly different directions at the same time. But if there's 40 people, there's no way that you can watch them all. It's just not possible. And then with the equipment, there's just no way that you can, like, you're dealing with, like, machines and people, so really 5 students is really 10 things, because you have the 5 humans and then the 5 machines. And, like, you've done a fair number of chair classes in here, Kelly, and, like, so when, like, Donna's working 5 people and 5 chairs, like, you're getting a full workout as the teacher, even if you're having the clients help you. Just and you saw me teach 5 people in the chairs and then 6 of you on the towers. Like, that's really, like, and that was at the same time as I was having you guys move things for me, because I wanted you to learn. But it's just a lot to, like, and I would miss things because I would see one person doing slightly something wrong and I would try to fix that. So that's, I think, definitely, in my opinion, a good number. When you get to big cities with high rent areas, you're going to see way more people than that. That's one of the luxuries of being here, that we really can sort of have a little bit more of a small studio. Yeah. Right. And so you feel like you're actually getting, I don't know if I want to use the phrase work what you paid for, that you're getting your workout, as opposed to just going through the motions and hoping that you're doing it correctly.
Plus, I'm sure which is less of a risk for injury.
Absolutely. So that is a good liability insurance prevention measure, is that, if somebody tried to sue you, you could say, well, we were working one-on-one together, and I specifically said to that client, do yada, 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 and instead of doing yada, 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 they did blah, 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 blah. So generally, that's why I say there's minimal accidents happening here. I mean, stuff happens. We've had people fall off the machines. it just happens. I mean, we've never dropped the 80-year-old clients. So, yeah. But, I mean, teeth will fall down. Like, it's inevitable, no matter what. So if we flip this over, so one of the things that we like to do is design exercise programs to meet the client's needs, which we're going to talk about again at the end. You know, recognize conditions that they have so that they can successfully participate in a class. And then, as we said earlier, get medical attention when you need. If you start to read someone's intake form, which we're going to get to actually tomorrow more than today, and you realize that they've said something like outlandish on there that like you're like, I don't know if you should even be exercising, you're going to want them to talk to their doctor. I've always talked about creating some sort of specific form to like have someone take to a doctor, but we've never really had anyone come in here that was that messed up, other than a very specific story that I will tell you tomorrow, that I had to deal with. But if it happens, we'll get a specific form. The other thing is like your relationship with the client. Like, do you trust the client enough that like I was working with Nina who's pregnant. Like, I've known Nina long enough that I trust her that if she was having some issue with her pregnancy, that she needed to do something in particular or not do certain things or like take rest breaks, I would trust her to tell me in the 5 seconds when I checked in with her at the beginning of her lesson, how are you doing today? Is everything still okay? I would trust that she's not going to keep it from me. Plus, pregnant ladies are pretty good because they don't want to have anything happen to their pregnancy. Yeah, they're cautious. Now, when they're coming back from the exercise, that's a different story. Everybody wants to get back in shape faster. So I wouldn't make her bring a doctor's note specifically because I do trust her. I mean, plus that's her 4th kid. That somebody who's really vain might try to come back too soon, and then they're going to do real damage to themselves. So I might make them bring a doctor's note to say that they're cleared for exercise. It would just really depend on my relationship with them. If it was a complete stranger who had a baby 8 weeks ago, I would make them bring me a doctor's note. It's not that I wouldn't teach them. It's just that I would want to make sure that they really were all put back together to start exercising again. Touching a client is a whole interesting bundle of worms. Some people feel that they need to ask permission to go touch a client every time they go to touch them. None of the teachers in here really do that, but that is sort of what some school of thought is that can I help you? I don't do a lot of heavy duty touching unless that client needs it. I'll do a lot of tapping and poking and sort of gently guiding. Some people think that if you're going to touch a client, you need to put one hand on and then sort of assist with another one so that the client knows where both your hands are. There's all kinds of schools of thought. You'll figure out what you're comfortable with. If it was a completely new client, I would definitely say can I touch you? But if they're doing footwork and I wanted them to change their foot position slightly, I would definitely not ask. I would just sort of people's feet. It's their feet. It's when you get into starting long stretch and you're grabbing at their torso and things like that, or if you're climbing behind them into the reformer, which I do a fair amount, just to try to lift them and help them. I will warn a first time client, but then after that, unless they acted weird, I would not she moved, had the client in here that was so ticklish that you literally could not touch her. Like, literally could not touch her. Like, if you went to, like, point at her, she would giggle.
Oh my gosh.
I actually think it was some sort of, like, system overstimulation issue as opposed to actually being, like, tickled. Because she had some other, like, from having gotten to know her, she had some other stuff going on. But yeah, she was a no touch. So you had to use your words a lot. Most, like, a lot of cues you can use words that they're not going to get the point across as well as actually saying, like, as actually, like, touching and cueing. The other thing that and this was something that I was told in my teacher training, and it kind of made sense to me, and I kind of have stuck with it, is that, like, you can touch ladies differently than you can touch male clients. That, and it depends on if you know the male client, too, like, or how long you've known them. That they need to, like, that sometimes you don't want to, like, gently graze them, whereas, like, if you were touching a lady, like, you could, like, you know, gently graze the back of their back with your fingers, like, telling them to relax or something, and that would not get, like, misconstrued. I was told, like, whole hands, like, that, like, a whole hand was, like, very sort of directive as opposed to, like, nurturing. And it kind of made sense to me when I went into, like, thought, and then after that it kind of, like, it just made sense to me, like, what I was trying to get them to do and what I needed to do, that, like, as opposed to, like, you know, that you'll sort of feel what's comfortable for you. So in the PMA guidelines, it states in here that you should not claim to prescribe an exercise program. I actually have a master's in exercise physiology, so I technically could prescribe exercise to clients. I don't, I still have my, like, certification and everything up to stuff. I don't use it, technically in here, so really no one's prescribing exercise. You can assign homework. If you really wanted someone to do something out of here, and people will sort of ask for those things sometimes, we definitely don't diagnose. I have surmised and spied things that I'm pretty sure I know what's going on with them. I also feel like I went to physical therapy school with my husband because we were living together when he was in PT school. Yes, so I feel that was like a we experience, not a he experience. So I have pretty good, like, working knowledge of, like, things being awry, and other teachers that ask me to, like, talk to someone about something, I can usually tell if I feel like that's a tweak, or if that person really does need to go see someone. And so as a Pilates instructor, we don't prescribe diets or supplements. If you do something on the other side of things, you know, that's a different story. It's just not something that you would tie into your session. And actually, my insurance that I have on the studio specifically does not allow people to do that in this space. And we don't treat or rehabilitate an injury, but you can follow a physical therapist's orders. So if somebody who was a client or a new client or referred here from somewhere had a specific injury, and you know, you emailed or they came in saying, I talked to my physical therapist, they said it was fine for me to come back to Pilates, but they said, like, we should do as much spinal extension as possible. You can take that into consideration when you're planning out their lesson. That's just being a good Pilates teacher, as opposed to, like, rehabbing their injury. You're following someone else's instructions. So if something went awry, it would be between either their physical therapist directly telling you what to do, or them saying, my therapist said I can come back, but I'm not allowed to lift my arm higher than here. Like, that's fine. We can work in those boundaries. If and on our intake form, it does specifically ask, like, have you seen an orthopedic, a physical therapist, a chiropractor? It is a massage therapist. Like, I came up with every like healer I could think of for a specific thing recently. And so they should tell you. And so if they don't, that's their own issue. The next thing is, we're technically not counselors, but if you come in here and you see some of the people that do like private sessions, somehow a lot of times, like, you develop the relationship with the client and you turn into also partially their therapist. But if it's getting to the point where like they're treating you as their therapist, if it's bothering you, it's time to address it with the client versus or it's maybe time for them to see a new instructor, which we'll talk about later. But technically that's not our role. But as you develop relationships with them, if things happen. So that's funny that the same thing is basically on here in two different ways. And so we're back to do not touch without permission. And then if some sort of, so those are all the odd things that would cause you to tell them they need to seek medical help or calling an ambulance for them or whatever. So I've had two situations where we've had to have clients stop exercising. I never had one happen in my own studio, and now Beth has had that experience. And she was in Lemoyne without me, so that added to the whole shenanigans that she called me. She literally had a client that, like, had she and I not made the decision that something needed to be done, literally, like, would have died. And that was the same thing that happened when I was in a studio. So either of these clients, I was not teaching that I was there when it happened. One of the clients, when I worked in a studio in Pittsburgh, had deep vein thrombosis. So they had a blood clot in their leg, and their legs started to swell and get puffy. And the telltale signs that, like, someone's, like, retaining fluids is if you, like, touch their leg and it didn't, like my leg doesn't stay in there. It, like, goes back to its normal shape. Her legs were swollen, and when you touched it, like, the little dent stayed there, and so she wasn't getting proper blood flow, and the fluids weren't moving, and so she, just like the client here, refused to have us call the ambulance, and we insisted we had to call her husband. So we made her husband come and get her, which he was actually... in the situation of the client in Pittsburgh, I believe her husband was a TA, and the minute he got there, he was like, we're going to the emergency room right now. And he was a little annoyed that we hadn't called the ambulance, but it's kind of hard to call an ambulance when, like, the person's standing there begging you not to call an ambulance, which was kind of always sort of a lesson in my head that, like, if it ever got, like, if her husband... playing that back over in my head, like, if her husband hadn't been, like, 10 minutes away, like, yeah, like, if he had said, like, oh, I'm like, from here, like, let's say he said, I'm working in Chambersburg, I'll be there in 2 hours, like, I'll meet her at home in 2 hours, like, one, you should never let them drive home, and two, that's just too long if you're just not sure. If they really didn't want you to call an ambulance and you could do it, you could drive them to the emergency room, which, I mean, is taking an extra liability into your hands and something that you would have to consider. Plus, that would have to do with your relationship with the client. Beth had a client who comes in here regularly, and since everyone in the room is a teacher at the moment, it was Hava. Have you met Hava? Okay, everyone will meet Hava at some point. I'm telling the Hava story. Hava had a lot of health issues way back when and was cleared and fine. And then Donna and I have both taught her, and she was having heart issues, and she was wearing a Holter monitor trying to figure out what was wrong with it. And it had sounded off a bunch of times. That she showed up, and Beth actually taught her in privates, and Donna and I both had taught her in group classes. She showed up in Lemoyne one day, and she wasn't feeling well, and it was early, and she also has some eating issues on top of that. So she said she just hadn't had a real breakfast. She had her drink, which she has this weird drink that you'll get to see. And so she had that, but nothing else. And so Beth was like, we'll just take it easy. And so they started doing some things. And she got white as a ghost. And so Beth was like, I think something's wrong. And she was like, I don't want to call the ambulance. Let me call my cardiologist. Well, they weren't open yet. So then Beth was like, okay, lay down for a little. And she's like texting me, like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And it was actually my day off. And so I was like, well, I'm out with Olivia, that I'm in Carlisle. I'll drive your way. That I was in Carlisle and she was in Lemoyne. So at this point, then I was like, I'm on my way. So then she finally got a hold of her husband. And at that point, she had gotten so white that she wasn't really, like, making sense when Beth was talking to her. Like, she was talking to her, but not making sense. And probably had I been there, I would have thought to check her pulse. And I didn't think to text that to Beth. Plus, I'm not sure Beth would have been able to do that. And it's not really in our scope of practice. Like, her heart rate was really, really, really slow, which I found out in the backstory after she did get to the emergency room. So Beth got her husband on the phone, and her husband drove over. And she sort of started to come to, and she's like, I'm driving myself home.
Oh, really?
And so they futzed around there a little while longer. I got there. She started to look a little bit better. So her husband then didn't drive her. She drove home. Her husband drove and followed her, and I followed them because I didn't trust them. And they went home. And she had at this point gotten an appointment at the cardiologist later that day. And then she started to do worse again. And she ended up having to go to the emergency room and having to have emergency surgery to put a pacemaker in. And that actually wasn't the real issue. She had been seeing a cardiologist, and they misdiagnosed her heart issue. And so she was on medicine for, I can't remember what, but whatever medicine she was on, I can't remember what they thought she had, but basically the medicine they had given her for whatever condition they thought she had, which was not what she had, she ended up developing fluid around her heart. So she was going into congestive heart failure. So had Beth just sent her home alone, yeah, exactly. Right. So she was at home with her husband, and she got worse, and he was just hanging out with her until her doctor's appointment that afternoon because he didn't want her to drive there once he had gotten her home, but then she got worse, and they ended up calling an ambulance and taking her to the hospital, and then I think it was the next day she had the pacemaker put in. And she's not on anything right now, and she's not on any monitors, but she, I think, still needs one more surgery. So, when the clients get white, the moral of the story is, don't let them go themselves. Even though, technically, you wouldn't be liable once they leave. If they won't let you call an ambulance, get them to someone who's, at least knows them or is there, emergency contact. So we do have emergency contacts on everyone in the computer. We used to have them on paper forms, but they're all in the computer. Most people have, in case of emergency, people in their phone. But, I have my phone locked because I have a toddler.
You would be calling 911 probably.
Right, God only knows what she would be calling. Probably she'd be calling, Asia. Yeah, with the number she dials or whatever, Brazil. But, so between their phone and that, you should be able to find someone.
I had a quick question. You might address this later.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Time. I feel like I've been in here, or maybe when I was done with a class or whatever, and there was a client who has vertigo.
There are several clients that come in here that have vertigo.
That would make me very nervous.
So part of the reason that there are so many clients that come in here that have vertigo is that is actually my husband's specialty.
Oh wow. Okay.
That's what he did his dissertation on. So we've passed a lot of people back and forth. I don't see them all personally. I actually see a lot of them. So it depends on what kind of vertigo they have. There's a couple different kinds. There's something that so there's positional vertigo, which has to do with like if they look or turn and look in different directions, it sets off their vertigo. So they would most likely, in that case, and my stepmom actually has vertigo, so it might have been her that you saw. Because she comes in and works out. Oh no, she comes in on Thursdays, so you wouldn't have seen her. She works out with Carrie on Thursdays after Thethel. So like hers, she has to do exercises to keep it away. Some people can't, and Suzanne who comes in, who's got the shorter hair, and she's real tall and blonde. She has like positional exercises bother her. So like if she looks back real far and or up or down all at the same time, that sets hers off. So like she has to be careful getting up and getting down, and we don't lay her completely flat because that's another thing that sets it off. A lot of times rolling back over the ball sets those off. My client Janet, who works out after so Sam and Janet both have vertigo, and they both see Andy.
Sam, like the Sam.
Yeah, Sam.
Okay.
So he just lays on that tiny pillow, and Janet can't go completely flat at all. So like if we're working on the Cadillac, I don't ever lay her all the way flat. So a lot of
really alters what you do with them, obviously.
it doesn't really alter. Most of the clients that come in here who have vertigo just don't lay flat. Like when they a ball when they're rolling back, and then we have a whole series of pillows, and they usually have a favorite pillow that they like to use that they've discovered is their favorite pillow. So Luann, who comes on Mondays and Thursdays, and on Thursdays she works out with my stepmom, also has vertigo. Beth Baginski, who comes in on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, also has vertigo.
But I know with Sam when he was on the he did lay down.
He did. He has that one little pillow he likes under his head.
So that works for him.
Yeah, and that's enough for him. And then we're just careful when he gets up.
Right.
So it just depends on what they have going on. Does that make sense? And if you get somebody who, like, even when you're in your training, if you get somebody who you're not sure of and they forewarn you what they have, shoot me an email or a text and we can have a conversation about, what I know about that and, what I can forewarn you. And then a lot of times we can set up a session so that I'm in here teaching someone else at the same time, or I'm just in here hanging out. It used to be a little easier for me to do that before Olivia because I could just come over here and do paperwork. She is with a sitter like a lot of times during like teaching times, or I can come over and just help you get started, just to make sure that you and the client are on the same page, because sometimes when they come in and give you the full story, it's a little bit more. But usually it's not that, like, vertigo's kind of, I hate to say it, like, not that big of an issue. Like, not to make... So there's probably something that triggers it.
Well, he has veneers.
Okay. So when he has a flare, it probably gets worse. Yeah. Is it a warning sign that his veneer is getting worse?
He'll get like a buzzing sound.
Yeah. So. So yeah, could be so it's not necessarily a reason for him not to come in unless he's too dizzy. Oh, I also have a client who can't get on the reformer because it flares up their vertigo. Like they just can't get on it. So we do other things.
He didn't have any problems. Now, Debbie, when I had her in here, she doesn't have vertigo, but she said she did feel like a little
Nauseous?
Yeah, but she did.
So it could just be her head position. Like if she, I mean, I've seen Debbie, and I never noticed anything like weird about her, like her posture or anything. But it could be just where she is, and she needs a little more frothing up on there, or it could be just something that like it doesn't work for her. And usually
It was nothing that like
bothered her.
she just said
Yeah.
it wouldn't keep her from
Coming back for exactly. Yeah. But you can try a little pillow and see if that just relieves it, just to like change the position of her head.
Plus it was the
For
first time
sli-
ever on it.
So yeah.
So you might get used to it.
Do you do trial classes here also? Do we do that at all?
Not usually, but I mean, if somebody wanted to come in, you could work something out. Okay, so this is kind of a weird topic next, because it's probably going to change the way it's set up in the studio this year, because I have been, my accountant just basically told me that I need to change everyone from independent contractors to employees. Most studios are actually making that move. It will probably affect people that teach here part-time and people that teach here full-time sort of differently. We're still trying to figure out exactly what I need to do to stay in compliance with the government. No, you never want to get audited and then being told you owe back taxes. As of right now, everyone in here is an independent contractor instead of an employee. The main definitions of independent contractors are that they set their own hours, you have control over what you teach, you pay your own taxes, I give you a 1099, and you file a Schedule C. There's a lot of controversy in the Pilates world about what Pilates teachers are. I belong to like a mastermind of Pilates studio owners, and there's nothing that'll get an argument going on our like little forum faster than this topic. Since I belong to this mastermind group, somebody I know whose studio is in New York has gone from independent contractors to employees and now back to independent contractors. Which sounds like a lot of legal paperwork, because every time you do that, you have to change your employment agreement with your employees or contractors, as you see that. The big issue with equipment studios making them different than yoga studios, or like your dance school. What are you in the dance world? Are you an independent contractor? Okay, that's interesting. Because the main stipulations that I've been getting back and forth with my accountant about is, one, you use my equipment. And technically I own the equipment, which apparently is a red flag. Which it always hadn't been, because contractors can rent space. So, I don't know. And then the other issue is, technically, if you're a contractor, you're supposed to kind of do like all your own marketing and all your own like acquiring of clients, which is what I kind of thought was a little bit odd about the dance thing. That kind of sets that off, because they probably assign or offer up.
They offer up classes and then people sign up.
Exactly.
So it's not like I'm recruiting.
Exactly. You're not. There we go. So you're not acquiring your own. There's no handouts at the moment. We're talking independent contractor versus employees.
I'm excited because I have a question.
Okay, so what are you at the yoga studio?
We're independent contractors.
Okay, so we're probably in the process of transitioning. We're all independent contractors to employees. My accountant basically told me I had to.
Okay.
That's
what a lot of accountants are starting to advise spaces. Okay, so as independent, this is my question as far as independent.
Mm-hmm.
As independent contractors, do you make them sign a document saying that they can teach outside a certain radius?
Mm-hmm.
What's the radius that you
10 miles.
Ooh, you're big. Okay. I was just curious because they're doing that as well. Now they become employees.
Now it's 10 miles, but there's a lot of caveats to it.
Mm-hmm.
So my 10 miles is Like, Kathy teaches spin at the Navy base. I could care less.
Right.
The Navy base is what? 2.5 miles from here? Susan teaches kinder dance down at the end of the street. I could care less. So that's part of the reason that the mileage is so large. And then I would also allow people to teach NAT classes other places. Like, I have a NAT instructor that does some subbing for me that teaches at the township. So it's very like
Well,
it's on a case by case basis.
I was just wondering.
But
Because-
that's like,
Because some people have been let go at my studio because they were working within a close radius. That's the only reason why they decided to make a sign. Ours is 8 miles. I'm having job changes. They're having financial difficulties and there's job changes, so I'm losing out on some paycheck that I count on. So I'm in the process, and it's almost at the 8 mile mark away from the studio. It's like 7 point something. It's really close to the 8 mile range. I'm going to interview to see if I can teach a Pilates class and a yoga class. Because that's revenue. I mean, I need to make up my revenue that I was counting on.
so what I I see, and I offer, and the other reason that ours is so far is I probably offer benefits to my instructors that I'm probably sure, and I could be mistaken, I try to make it worth their while. So we have all kinds of things. Like, I host continuing education workshops. I allow our instructors to trade with a client if they want without the studio taking a cut. There's a lot of things that I do to try to make it like pretty.
We get to trade within the house.
Oh no. This is like with anyone.
Yeah.
So you can bring in one client a week and trade with them private for private.
Bye.
And I bring in continuing education workshops. I took everyone who wanted to go to DC to my favorite Pilates studio. Literally the weekend I came down with GBS. So I was in DC, like, not sure neurologically what was wrong with me, with all of them trying to pretend that there was nothing wrong with me. So I took them down there. We took 2 classes and did a workshop with Mariska. In February, I brought her up here to teach in that workshop. So all of those things I just paid for the staff. So within that, I expect a certain amount of loyalty to the studio in return for those kind of things. And so basically, I don't let them teach equipment Pilates within 10 miles of here. But if you wanted to go teach something else, which a lot of people that are in the fitness industry teach other modalities, but I kind of feel like if you're like, it's hard not to go to another location to do it and not like cross-pollinate. Like, it's just hard not to, as an instructor. A client's going to find you at point A or point B, and they're going to want more of you or more of your style, and it's hard not for, like, I mean, I obviously would love it if all the clients were loyal to the studio, which some of them are, and I try to really like sort of foster people trying different instructors and doing different classes, and then when the instructor goes on vacation, if you still want to come in, we've got an instructor that'll cover your session. I try to really create that kind of environment in here where it's low drama, and it's also hard when there's 10 ladies who work in one place. Like, I mean, that's just hard to do, but I do try to create that, and I try to get everyone loyal to the studio. I'm not necessarily saying loyal to me, I mean to the studio. And I mean, everyone who was here, Kelly probably saw it more than you do because you come in once a week, but like when I went out sick, literally everyone.
Everybody stepped up.
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean.
Because Kathy was the one that sent out emails to all of us that were coming for training.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's that sort of environment that I want in my space. And if anyone else went out sick, we would do the same thing for them. Like, Mary's mom died, everybody made a special effort to get to Lemoyne. I had a particularly high number of health crises in the last year. So they covered when my mom died. They covered my maternity leave. Like, I didn't take a very long maternity leave, but like, yeah, that's just, and that's, I mean, and unfortunately, that's the kind of help that I've needed, which I'd like to say that we're over.
Yeah, hopefully you're done.
We're done. We're done. We're done.
You're good.
I mean, I do still have a 92-year-old living grandmother, but I'd like to keep her from causing me any more medical maladies. I feel like I've maxed out my 30s.
Yeah.
But I don't think she's going to make it into my 40s. So, because then she'd be 101.
You never know.
You do never know. So that's sort of that. But I think we're actually going to employees, which would then basically definitely allow me to say, like, this is how it is.
Yeah.
And I did actually, and Kelly may have saw this. It was very quietly, I did fire someone this year. Basically sort of let them, it was just kind of under the table. It just kind of happened, and it was probably non-noticeable to most clients, but they started teaching about 4.5 miles from here. And I had given them, like, basically the leeway that they would be allowed to finish out teaching here until they started teaching there. And then I heard through the grapevine that they were advertising their other classes in the studio. And so I fired them on the spot.
No, you don't do that. That's unethical.
Right.
That's ethics right there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I fired them on the spot.
I'm having, I'm dealing with that kind of dilemma, and it's not me, it's someone else who is, and I don't think she's doing it in it's not being done in a malicious way.
It just happens. And that's what I was saying about teaching equipment Pilates elsewhere. It just happens. It's not like, it's not on purpose.
Well, this person's doing training in the borough in Camp Hill, and she's an aerial yoga teacher at our studio.
Uh-huh.
And she's like, oh, you need to come over and do a private session, and do a consultation. Like, she's trying to bring, but I'm like, you can't do it to the clients in that space.
Yeah.
You could do it to everyone outside, but you can't do it like in, like,
Yeah.
like they, people are like, oh, where are you training? I'm like, training here locally. They're like, oh, you must be training with Allison. Like, a few people figured it out. I didn't say, and Rachel's like, I'm fine with you telling them where you're doing your
training
because you're working here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to like pull anyone over or what have you. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to keep it like really
Separate.
Yeah, and I mean, and there is some like muddying the waters. That's what I said. It's just hard, and that's why I sort of have just said, this is what, like, I used to teach at the JCC, and I gave that up just because. I mean, even I taught at the JCC when we moved back here.
See, in my world,
I taught all their Pilates classes for 3 years.
Huh.
So
I'm sure we were in the same building.
Mhm.
Because I have somebody who's the manager who teaches yoga, who's teaching at the Y, because if she teaches one class a week, she keeps her membership.
So
Her family.
I
That's
taught
right.
at the JCC for a free shower because I used to run along the river in the morning, and I had a real job downtown, so it was a free shower for me.
Right.
Basically that's what I was like. I need a shower on the shore. Like, how do I make this happen? So I started teaching one class, and then they were like, oh, let's add another class. And so then I added a yoga class, and I think at the end I was teaching maybe like 4 classes, and then I slowly gave them up because I felt really bad because I had developed a relationship with those people that came to the classes, and I couldn't just leave the group fitness like person didn't teach what I taught. So like if I was out, there was like if I was on vacation, the class was canceled. So I felt bad leaving her high and dry. So I found her a Pilates instructor, then I found her a yoga instructor, and then I gave it up. But I mean, I feel like doing those kind of things is like karma. Like, you know what I mean? Like I earned that, so like it was
Well, that's why I'm trying to respect their I'm like, well, it's pretty darn close to the 8 miles. So I mean, I was really like keeping that distance.
Yeah, exactly.
No one's gonna know.
No,
So
no.
I have a question.
I'm not
and
gonna
this
tell
might be
anybody.
stupid one also. Like with momentum, if somebody if I have a friend or something who is taking classes at Momentum and also wants to, and not necessarily Pilates classes because they have a million classes there, and then wants to take classes here, is that okay?
Yeah, we have a lot of people actually that have Momentum memberships that come here, because they don't. I mean, they have equipment Pilates there. The last I checked, they were lacking trained instructors.
That's what I'm hearing.
But they also have, because they're employed, they make you sign a non-compete contract. So if you leave, like they have the toughest hire policy, and when you leave,
mine is very similar.
yeah, it's pretty tough. Like you can't leave them and move down the road and open a space somewhere to.
It's 90 days.
90 days or something. Yeah, because Rachel taught for Momentum, but she brought it home to her house for a while.
Kathy taught for Momentum.
Yeah, I've heard a few people.
There's somebody else I know that's contemplating leaving, and that's part of her issue. And actually, I know 2 people that are thinking about leaving, but it is what it is. And there's really, there's 2 sides to that. Contracts and TA don't hold up very well in court.
No.
Their contracts and TA don't hold up well in court, and it's very hard to like enforce anything. Like you can tell people things, but like it's just hard. So, just as some points of reference, if you are self-employed, you can deduct half of your self-employment tax, all of your health insurance costs, and any business deductions, which would include education and office expense and car mileage. I drive to work, Kelly, just in case you were unaware. So, Kelly lives just a little bit past me.
I know. We left the other day and you were walking. I'm like, she must live right over there.
Yeah.
I saw Kelly walk in. That's why I knew Kelly.
Yeah.
I knew you lived here because.
Yes, if you ask my accountant, I drive our Honda Civic to work every day. Just as a point of reference.
Is that like 0.1 mile?
He calculated it. I can't remember what it was. That he came up with an answer. I think it's a mile.
Good. So when you do your car insurance, if they ask how many miles you drive 7 a mile round trip or a mile.
I don't know.
It's probably a mile round trip. So you drive, if you're here 7 days a week, let's say that's 7 miles a week. You can calculate it. You can lower your car insurance rate by the amount of miles you drive for your job.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying.
Yeah. So do we have any other questions about, we talked a lot about independent contractors and employees and. No.
I'm excited that you're talking about that. I was like, yes, I got here 3
You came right there.
Well, and we can always revisit any of this tomorrow. So the next thing on here talking about business is the studio is on every type of social media known to mankind, which I will send you this presentation. It has all of the little fun things on it, which is only pertinent because everyone has to do a marketing project for themselves. So
I'm in the process of doing a webpage,
so it can be anything. So you just need to propose to me what you're doing, and then I will tell you if it's a good, worthwhile marketing project. That we have had some people in the past, do some stuff with some of our social media accounts as their marketing project. So I will allow you either to be administrator on them or one of them or whatever. Just let me know.
so me marketing myself, creating my webpage.
Exactly.
That was like that. Don't laugh. I didn't even think about that when I saw that, but like that's been on my
to-do list.
This year.
Yeah. So, and if you need any advice or help or talk about platforms or anything like that, we can talk, and then I can give you some advice of things that have worked.
And then I'm hiring the 23-year-old to design
Fiverr.com.
Okay.
India, 23-year-old in India to design your webpage for $5.
I have a 23-year-old that lives in my house that I feed, and I don't have to pay a damn dime.
Then
for it.
there you go, and it can take her as long as you want.
Exactly.
All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is referrals and networking. So
And then, so the marketing project, when does that?
there's one for each trimester.
Okay.
One for each trimester.
And it can be anything of your choosing. That's part of your homework. And it counts into your hours. And you can do anything you want. It can be super complicated, like creating your own website, or as simple as, if you wanted to host an event here, or if you wanted to do some sort of challenge on Facebook, like I did the 90-day challenge. If you wanted to orchestrate another one of those, last July I put out like an exercise a day. On every day in July, I put out a different abdominal exercise onto our Facebook channel. It could be, something as complicated as that, or to something as simple as,
Instagram.
yeah.
Pilates 15-second video.
Yeah, I mean, you could create some stuff to market yourself. If you, some of the instructors have come up with, you could create a workshop. Like if you wanted to do a foam rolling workshop or a magic circle class, or you wanted to offer one of the Pilates 101 things, those were also, they all did happen. They didn't happen quite the way I wanted them to happen, but that's one of those things I just got to breathe and let go because I was in the hospital. I had created that Pilates 101 series that was a free class that we had marketed, and then people could come in and take a 30-minute trial session in a group. You could do another one of those. So you could do something that I've done. If it was a flop, I'll tell you not to do it. There have been failed. I have done failed marketing things. The Healthy Grocer hosts classes. I have desperately tried to do that, and that has been a big fail every time. That somebody else could try again with a different edge. You could go teach a class somewhere if you wanted. Like you could go teach a Pilates class somewhere else in like your network. Like I taught a chair Pilates class at the church that my mother belonged to because the director reached out to me and said that they were doing a healthy themed at all. They do a weekly ladies' night at the church, and January was all about being healthy. So I went and taught a 45-minute chair class. So I have all that written down so I can loan that to someone. So there's like choices around that. I was gonna say you could go to Ed's office, but he doesn't. You could go to your husband. I don't know if he has an office somewhere. You could go to someone's office and teach a class. Ed's office would be pretty useful since it's useless to you since it's in Philadelphia. The goal with the marketing projects are to market yourself a little. Like, I mean, you can market the studio, but it's also the goal to like sort of market you to help you build your clientele. So you want to market, to whatever you think. Like, it's not all about me. Even though sometimes I like to pretend it's all about me. This is definitely a situation where it's not all about me, but it's about helping you grow your Pilates business in some way that's useful, which sort of leads directly into referrals and networking. So it's like, who are your sources of information? Who do you, like, what groups do you belong to? What clubs, what interests, you could go to Walden Ladies Night and teach a class. I've never dabbled in that population.
A couple times I've gone.
Yeah.
Once it turned over to all the,
Yeah.
product pushing, I kind of backed away.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking, I do push a product. So.
You could teach a class out in the park to the neighbors, or you could even do a series. Like if you wanted to do a 4-week, like get started with Nat Pilates I have permission to teach in the park. So I had that cleared with the powers that be. So I just had to let them know if we're doing it at a certain time that all the legalities had been ironed, which was large hula hoops. Yeah, we're not going to be here that much longer because I have a client at 1 that if you want to observe, you can. But we're only going to be here 10 more minutes.
Okay.
And then we'll finish up with the rest of this. We'll add this to tomorrow's list. who keeps you informed in events, who are people you care about, and are there other like services that you use often that you could somehow commingle services, kind of thing. All right.
What's that first trimester over? You know what I'm trying to think about.
After the NAT workshop, so the end of the month.
The end of
May.
So we have to have our first marketing.
You do not have to have it done. You have to have it done by the time you're done.
Oh, I thought you said one for each.
There is one for each trimester, but you don't have to have it like.
Say here on June 1st.
Yeah, you don't need to be done. When you're done, you're done.
Okay.
But you don't need to like.
So.
Yeah, like so you're gonna do 3 things that you can do them on your own time.
By the time we're done with the year. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So if you're working at the studio, I try to create a very professional image. So we'll let Amy get changed, and then we'll call this quits. Unless she's got her jeans on, so she'll need a minute. I will get everyone who does decide to teach here business cards and a studio email. And then if you want any other things like flyers or postcards or schedules, we have those at the front desk, and you are able to take those as you like. And I think we're currently out of pricing sheets, and I need to update those anyway because I made yet another change to those. We got ahead of ourselves. There was actually a slide about the studio marketing project, so that got tied in there yet at another time. Okay, so we got all the way to Mind Body Online, and we didn't get to it. So
I am so over Mind Body. I can do it tomorrow.
So
Mind Body can be good and can be bad.
So what I'm going to do is I am going to stop my recording.